You've already worked with HTML controls and briefly viewed ASP.NET's code behind files. In this lesson, you'll use some very basic C# code to change the properties of controls on a web page. First, open the C# test sample file from your sample files folder. Click OK if prompted, and open default.aspx in Design View. We are now going to add a label control to the page. You'll find it in the Standard category of the toolbox. Set the ID property of the new label to Label Output. Now open the code behind file of default.aspx. You learned how to do this in Lesson 1.7. Alongside the code behind file, you'll notice there's also a file called default.aspx.designer.cs. This file is used by the design view of the Visual Studio interface. All of the code inside it is automatically generated, and you will never have to edit it. Inside the code behind file, you can see the C# code that goes with default.aspx. At the moment, this is the important part. This is a method. Methods are the way that C# code is organized into pieces that can be run individually. The pageLoad method is an event handler. An event handler is a special type of method that runs in response to something happening. In this case, the event that triggers the event handler is the page loading. You'll learn more about event handlers in Lesson 3.2. The curly bracket symbols show where the method begins and ends. Everything between the curly brackets is part of the method. As you can see, at the moment the method is empty. Click in the gap between the curly brackets and add the following C# code. Label output dot text equals, begin inverted commas, hello world, end inverted commas, semicolon. Note that semicolons are required by C# to indicate the end of a line of code. You might have noticed in Lesson 2.11 that JavaScript uses the same convention. You'll notice, however, that the code that defines the method doesn't have a semicolon at the end of it. Lines that contain other code by using curly brackets don't need semicolons because the curly brackets define the area that they affect. Because C# doesn't consider a line of code to be finished until it sees a semicolon, you can split a long line of code onto multiple lines without causing any problems. View the page in your browser now. As you can see, the text property of the label was changed when the page loaded. We're now going to examine exactly what ASP.NET has done. To do this, we'll view the source code of the page in Internet Explorer. Right-click on the browser window and click View Source. Here you can see the actual HTML code that was sent to the browser. You'll notice a span tag with an ID of label output. If you close your browser and return to the source view of default.aspx, you can see the ASP::label control that this span tag was created from. When you requested the page, the web server converted the ASP control into HTML code that the web browser could understand. The real power of ASP.NET is the use of event handlers and C# code to change the properties of elements on the page in response to user interaction, making pages interactive. You're now going to add another line of code to make the label's text bold. return to the Code Behind file, add a new line to the event handler, and add the following code. Label output.font.bold equals true, semicolon. This piece of code is a little bit different to the previous one. The first property you set was the text property, which is a string. A string is literally a piece of text. When you set the property in C#, you put the value in inverted commas. C# automatically assumes that anything in inverted commas is a string. If you'd left out the inverted commas, the project would have failed to build and you would have seen an error. The second property is a Boolean. A Boolean can only be either true or false. You'll learn more about the different types of value in C# in Session 5. View the page in your browser now. As you can see, the text has been made bold by your C# code. You've now completed Lesson 3.1, Change Properties with C#.